Welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by Ryne Saxe, the founder and CEO of Eco. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Glad to be here. It's a highlight of my week, my month, my quarter. So
Yeah,
I'll do my
that's
best.
that's awesome to hear. And honestly, like I love having new people on the show because, of course, like I get to know new people, and then hopefully people in the Interop ecosystem as well get to know new opinions, right? So I'm super excited to do this.
Same, you're like the best at this. So throw me to the wolves, right? I'm sure there'll be plenty of clips that I get rugged on from this. We'll see. Hot takes.
We'll find out. I mean, so I've been like you've been thinking about the stablecoin space for a very long time, right? So I want to make this episode about one understanding the stablecoin landscape from you because you've
Mm,
spent so much time in that niche of crypto, and then of course like get to understand about eco and then where you fit into the interop ecosystem. But I want
yeah,
to start
for
with
sure.
like going back to your journey with eco. Like, what was the original idea? How did it evolve into what you're building today?
Yeah. I think that there's some like history to eco, if you know, you know, and a couple product pivots along the way. But one thing led to another, I think, in maybe a more natural way than people might think. So honestly, we were probably too early to stables. Um, but a bunch of people were. Like our earliest roots are 2017 Ethereum. Ethereum community was way more, I think, San Francisco centered at that time, just at least proportionally. And so a lot of people were here. And we were sort of all kind of those early projects. They start as conversations, and they turn into a project, and maybe a company emerges from that. And that was kind of our experience 2017, 2018. And it was just apparent to us, most people that sort of were early to eco have a payments background. So like we understand really well how money moves, how money doesn't, card processing stack, things like that. Like fintech, e-commerce, world of payments. And we're looking at crypto. We all already believed in crypto for our own kind of technical, idealistic reasons. We're just this is money evolution, right? Like if money is a technology, this is the next step. And money just flows with crypto like it does not in TradFi today, and it's inevitable. And that was apparent to us at that time. What was interesting at that time, though, is a lot of people were sort of like skipping stablecoins psychologically, ourselves included in the early days, right? Because we had all kind of been Bitcoin pilled, and then Bitcoin wasn't behaving like money. And so there were a bunch of early like algo stable payment coin projects that were just like, okay, if you build a good distribution path for a new coin, it can have a totally different model, but it needs to be different from Bitcoin. It needs to behave more like money. And there's a lot of experimentation in what that might look like. And we were part of that. And I think we were all just like a little bit too early because Ethereum was, the L2 roadmap had not emerged yet. So everything was mainnet, everything was gas expensive. There was no tool chain to develop. And it was really hard to stand anything up. And then even if you did stand it up, you spend a year working on it and you're like, this is not usable still. Or people just aren't ready for it. And so our earliest days were sort of thinking about kind of how would you pay, in mainstream e-commerce on Ethereum? What token would you use to do that? How would you get that token? The merchant incentive to accept crypto was pretty clear, even if it was early. The consumer incentive to use crypto was not yet. And so we kind of we muddled through that for a couple of years. Um, and we got to the end of that couple of years, and we're basically sort of like, okay, stablecoins are still not emerging. Ethereum mainnet's not quite scaling yet. Um, MetaMask is still the exact same, right, as it was when we started, and which is something we were wrong about. We thought that the wallets were going to be more like mainstream fintech app UX in a matter of time, and that just didn't really kind of
I mean,
prove out.
in terms of the stable coins, like what were the most popular ones out there? Like I don't think there was anything other than USDT at that point.
There weren't, yeah, it was USDT, and USDT was pretty isolated to maybe there was some emergent market like consumer use of USDT at that time, but I think it was like vast majority like trading,
Mhm.
right? And USDT still seemed risky at that time because it was kind of opaque in its model. And USDC had emerged, but it was still super early, and it was like far from clear that it was going to stick. And then there were a bunch of algo stables. None of them like really worked great, but this was like season one of algo stables, and so you had the ampleforths, carbon fragments, the havens, which became synthetics. So some of it sort of like pivoted into something else adjacent and survived. And then some of those, just didn't work. They were a little too niche, a little too early. One of them, Terra, blew up spectacularly. And that was just all kind of the early mix. But it was pretty, I think by the time we got to 2020, um, USDC and USDT at least seemed solid
Mhm.
among different audiences. And so after those first couple years, we just thought, okay, we need to take a step back. We're trying to build infra. Infra's not maturing quite quickly enough. Ethereum's not scaling quite quickly enough. The payment coins are maybe a little bit too ambitious, maybe like cart before the horse. What we really need to do is sort of go app layer and build an app that puts stables in people's pockets. And maybe if you have a token model, you can sort of leverage that token model to incentivize this product and to bring people on chain with it, but it needs to start with a stable. And so we built, to my knowledge, the first kind of successful mainstream USDC based neobank,
Mhm.
full featured bank replacement. And this was a US only product. And so, your listeners are global. Many of them might not know this product or wouldn't have had access to it, but the US based users would have. And that was our kind of first product market fit, our first hit. It was pretty well timed. What was wrong with it is that it was a little bit too soon for the US kind of banking regulatory environment. In the beginning, we got good traction there, but post FTX, as that environment became more hostile, it became really difficult for us to grow that product. But that was our big bet on stablecoins. It's like, okay, USDC is emerging. People are starting to accept USDC or the concept of a stablecoin as a thing. I don't have to pitch that anymore. How do we get people to use it? How do we incentivize people to hold it? Use this digital dollar instead of the other digital dollar in your bank that you're already using. Show you certain benefits for doing so.
I mean, so
And it's pretty
in
good.
that moment, were you questioning like your bet on stablecoins, or did you feel like, okay, we've at least identified the right uh, part of crypto to focus on? Like maybe the timing is off right now, but this is the correct problem.
Yeah, we felt pretty solid in that. I
Hmm.
think I think it's because of the payments background that we had, right? Like we had just like certainty when we started. This is inevitable. Technology questions, distribution questions, sure, all the like new technology and maturity questions are in front of us. We got to solve a bunch of those as a space, but this is just like better money technology. And so
What
I don't
was
think we
that
ever really
moment for you?
wavered.
Like for me, it was basically sending money to a friend in the US, right? Like I didn't have to go through a
Mhm.
bank. I could just do it within a minute and then at a fraction of the cost. Like sitting in
Yep.
India, that's a big thing because you have to go up, open up your bank account, and then there's just like a bunch of processes that you have to
Yeah.
go through. But what was that moment for you?
I don't think I had a UX moment, to be honest. Um, just because we were payments nerds. So we looked at this and you're like, okay, what are the merchant problems in payment settlement today or in card processing today? You got this progress, you got sort of like multiple layers of fee taking, you got multi-day settlement time sometimes. And so that eats into your margin in terms of the time cost of settlement as well as whatever the card network and the service provider skim off the top. And you look at crypto, even before stablecoins, and you're just like, it doesn't suffer from any of that. Even when crypto was slow and expensive, you're still settling within 10 minutes, and your fee is still like agnostic to what the total order size is. It's essentially a flat fee based on network congestion, slightly variable, right? But whether you're sending $1 million or whether you're sending $10, the fee is effectively the same. And those are fundamental improvements from the merchant's perspective, and it's just a matter of when, not if.
I think that's such a crazy part or like crazy aspect of crypto that is not talked about enough. Like I feel even if I talk to my friends who are not in crypto, right? Like we would talk about maybe Bitcoin or some asset that they can invest in, maybe NFTs at some point, but then
Hmm.
nobody actually talks about stable coins, which is the one thing with the most adoption. Like I don't
Hmm.
think my parents understand that okay, you can send money anywhere in the world in just an instant at
Yeah.
such low cost. So I
Yeah.
wonder why like we haven't done a better job just talking about stable coins with our friends.
I think it's because we were all too ambitious and we didn't want to admit that like the boring thing is the right thing to start. Even me, like I made this mistake for a couple years, to be honest. I was very confident in stablecoins, but I wanted people to like frog leap stablecoins and like, jump into the crypto deep end. Let's all go together. And they had to back up a little bit and remember at the end of the day, you're building a product for real people and you might need to lead them there more gradually, right? Like, and so I think that's why, to be honest. And stablecoins it's interesting. I've had to practice this for years. They're deceptively simple,
Mhm.
right? Like, how do you explain a stablecoin to an average person? Well, people don't stop and think about the fact that their money's already digital. They're already using a digital dollar,
Yeah.
right? And it took a really long time to simplify this and like make it make sense. And it's just a different digital dollar, right? With a sort of flat fee structure and no business hours. And the more we can kind of merge the user experience of that different digital dollar with the one you're traditionally used to, the easier that hop gets, which is the thesis for our app, incidentally. And I just think that it's kind of deceptively simple and a little bit that's kind of like an irony in stable coins. It's just like makes it a little bit more difficult to explain to people. right? Especially in the US, by the way. This is harder in the US. I think the money benefits of stablecoins are very often like more apparent um, the first time you use one. You have the aha moment if you're abroad or sending money across borders. But in the US, um, and some other, I think, economies where you have mobile money that's seamless, or apps like Venmo, there's just some nuance to explaining a stablecoin and why you would use it. That's not, immediately obvious to a lot of people.
Okay, so how did you go from like building this payments app around stablecoins to what you're building today with Eco? And then also like uh, explain what you're building with Eco today.
How did it go from there? Unfortunately, a lot of adversity in our experience. Um, so we built that app and it like ripped in the first couple years. We launched it in beta in 2020, adapted its early feature set to the kind of the remote COVID environment pretty effectively. And in 2021 and 2022, the app did really well. The company, we raised a lot of money and we grew quite a bit on that basis. Grew from like 12 employees to 50 or 60 to grow that app and to maintain it. It was a regulated fintech product in the US, so we had licenses for that product, MSB, NPLs. So there's a lot of overhead that goes into that, a lot of data overhead, compliance overhead, auditing overhead, payment ops in the background to keep money flowing. Every feature in the app had a core banking partner to sort of move money in and out of the app for that feature. And so it was behind the scenes quite a complex product to build. In the front end, we'd like to think wonderfully simple. But I think, the regulated status of that product became sort of its vulnerability post FTX. It became, our growth slowed. It became difficult to kind of keep control of our roadmap and stay on offense. And the banking environment was squeezing products like ours out. And we fought that fight for about 8 months. It was hell, to be honest. It was like it was startup hell. We had all this optimism, and then we kind of just got punched by this and put in a corner. And we essentially, you know, we felt like the writing was on the wall. Like we have to turn this product into an actual neobank, or it's not going to be allowed to exist. That's the exact opposite of what we started out to do, right? We're trying to create the neobank feature set in UX, but with a stablecoin in order to then take people on chain. But it was just very clear we were not going to be allowed to take people on chain with this product. Um, hindsight's 2020. Maybe we could have said just fight the fight for 14 more months and then it'll open up and you'll be able to do it. But with a high burn product like that that's not growing, you can't do that within the startup life cycle.
I think
And so we
that's the crazy part that a lot of people don't understand, right? Because what you're talking about is what 2020 in November FTX crash, and then this would have happened in early 2023. So we're literally what 20-24 months from that moment, and the landscape has
yeah,
totally changed. Like everyone is so
100%.
bullish on stablecoins. Regulations have changed completely. Like what you were building 2 years ago, people would pay I don't know how much money to actually like buy that company.
Yeah, I know it's kind of a bittersweet fact, right? Um, and so especially now with Circle's gangbuster, IPO and a lot of attention on USDC, I think that if you'd projected that forward, it's possible we would have had like the default USDC banking product. But you just like it's just such a there was no clarity on kind of when we were going to be able to sort of play offense again. Um, and so we wound it down at the end of 2023. I'm really proud of how we did that. There we had just like so fundamentally focused on user trust that we wound it down really gracefully, made sure that every cent in that product made it out to the end user in sort of a transparent manner. We had to let go of a bunch of people whose jobs were dedicated to that product. Most of them stayed with the company 3 full months through the full wind down period to support that. It was a really beautiful moment, in spite of its difficulty in the company's history. And then on the other side of that, we were sort of faced with the decision we could shut it all down, we could return some capital, um, or we could, you know, uh, try to parlay this adversity experience into taking one big swing. And we took a few months to evaluate that. The reason we ultimately chose to take the swing and we thought we had a good chance to is that we had already started to build the on-chain backend for that app, right? We never got to use it, but we'd started to build it. And we looked at it and we said, this is actually really good tech for stablecoin abstraction, um, cross-chain relaying, and we know you can build a great UX on top of it because we did. And so we thought, well, what if we just take that and turn it into a new protocol for managed sort of stablecoin bridging and stablecoin liquidity management in this kind of increasingly confusing multi-chain world that's already emerging. And we thought that's going to be a valuable problem to solve because the sort of liquidity fragmentation, stablecoin issue, is sort of issuer asset fragmentation is going to be a mess. And that's proven to be correct. And that sort of market organization problem is potentially a valuable one for someone to solve. And who better to solve it maybe than us, because we've been thinking about this for a long time. I don't know anyone else who's successfully built both stablecoin infra and stablecoin app, custodial and non-custodial tech. Let's roll all that learning up and sort of pivot into this infra direction. We're going back on chain. To hell with the regulated kind of hybrid off-chain on-chain product. And that's what we've been doing ever since. I would say we really committed to that like last May. So we're like maybe like 15 months into that journey. It took us probably 4 months to design what we thought was good, let the dust settle on the app, wind down, get the conviction we needed, and put it to our employees and our investors and say, this is the swing we intend to take. Do we have everyone in? And once it was clear that we did, we went for it.
And then I think the multi-chain alignment or the interop alignment kind of came obviously, right? Because if you started in May of last year, the ecosystem looks very different. There are so many chains, and then
Yeah,
bridges are sort of very popular, and you're seeing the intent-based model kind of take off. So I think
yeah,
that's where the idea for cross-chain relaying, especially with stablecoins, because most of the flow even today for cross-chain bridging is with stablecoins or like native gas tokens, right? So I think that's where
yeah,
the alignment for you with this interop ecosystem kind of came into the picture.
yeah. That's right. And I think we're looking a little bit further ahead in the long term, and also just thinking, our kind of you asked like what is eco today? I guess I didn't really answer that. Basically, we think about it as what should be the most powerful platform for using and programming stables across Web3.
Mhm.
Okay, bridging is a means to an end. You got to get a stable from point A to point B, but the programmability on top of that stable is what's really interesting to us, right? So if there's like a thesis with eco, it's almost like a UX thesis. It's like just use stables. That's not it's not the be all end all for everybody, for every
Mhm.
builder and for every end user. But 80% of on-chain actions, if we could just kind of translate them to a stable send UX, program that stable sense to do the thing you want to do, then that probably makes life a lot easier for developers, and it probably makes things a lot more accessible for end users. And so we're a little bit more full stack opinionated on what are the layers necessary to make that happen. How do you optimize those for stables and stables alone? And that's kind of our lane.
So you were talking about how like your core thesis is that a lot of the flow in crypto would move through stablecoins, right? And then if
Yeah.
you look at a lot of the cross-chain flows today, like a lot of it moves through stablecoins and gas tokens. So I feel like this is the market where a lot of the interop protocols are actually focusing, right? Because this makes up a lot of the order flow. So how are you looking at
Mhm.
competition in the ecosystem and also like making a place for yourself? Like, what's your edge?
I think our edge is our focus on stables from the beginning and the fact that we've been building for them for a long time. So, like I said before, we take kind of like a more full stack approach to how do you optimize for stables,
Hmm.
right? How do you optimize for stable speed? How do you optimize for stable programmability? At the end of the day, in our head at Eco, liquidity and UX are the same effing thing.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, and our edge is that we've built a protocol before. We built non-custodial and custodial stablecoin UX at the app layer before, and we understand where the slippage happens in between. Um, and so, yeah, I'm not surprised that a lot of other kind of interrupt protocols, I don't really consider ourselves one. We could debate that. Um, I'm not surprised that many of them are kind of gradually going harder at gas tokens and stables because that's just very practically where the order flow is,
Hmm.
right? Stables are the only sort of ubiquitous asset class across all chains. So if you're going to have to bridge something and translate an action from point A to point B, you're almost going to have to use a stable.
Hmm.
And I think we latched onto that insight very early on. We also latched onto the insight that this market's going to be a mess for a while as new stables launch all over the place, and we've designed for that pretty effectively. But I think our edge is our opinionation. Our edge is a good understanding of where kind of price slippage results in UX slippage, and where integration by an app of a protocol results in UX slippage, and and how we might squeeze that out and make our system a lot more efficient. And I think that when you look ahead 6-12 months, that positioning is really going to benefit us if you have kind of this, if you buy into this like just use stables kind of thesis, whether you're a protocol or an app developer, eco should be front of mind.
Hmm.
by that point in time. And it's just because of that focus up front. It's because we're performant, but it's also because we've just sort of won that mind share. And for us, stablecoin usage is interop. I think that's kind of what sets us apart. And so it's the opinionation, I think, that's really important and how that impacts our tech as well.
I think so. Longer term, your vision is basically to be the protocol for building anything with stablecoins, right? And then today you're kind of also focusing on like cross chain solving, and the way you're
Yeah,
talking, you also sound like a market maker, right? Because you're like focusing on stablecoins,
totally.
you're uh, like thinking about slippage, you're thinking about the spreads and everything. So in
Yeah.
that way, like how do you see the space kind of evolving? Because there's there was always speculation that as cross-chain order flow would grow, more and more market makers would come into the picture, right? So, like, do you see more and more market makers joining in, or do you feel like okay, it's still just bridges and maybe like some people, some teams like yours?
I see more market makers starting to join in, but it's slow.
Hmm.
I think it's slow. We had we had the sort of Twitter discussion about this last week, right? Like nobody's making money, but there's enough. Like I'm also on the record elsewhere saying like the fragmentation problem is going to get worse before it gets better.
Hmm.
And if that's true, and I just believe it is, at least in like the next 6 months, that actually like creates more design space for other sort of transaction executors and market makers to come in. Like fragmentation is good for them. Fragmentation creates ARB opportunities, right? You just have to know where to find them, or you have to work with a protocol that's going to sort of expose them to you. And so I see more market makers like coming in there, but what I see is also like a democratization. I hate the word. Can't even say it. I hate it so much I can't even say it. We've beat it to death, just like every other word that becomes important in crypto. I've ranted to you about this before, and you're seeing sort of a decoupling of the need to be a sophisticated market maker and a sophisticated sort of infra runner from just being able to execute transactions well. And I think that that's going to sort of also admit new people to the space. But what really I think gets interesting is when you start to talk about the programmability of these cross-chain actions, which a lot of people are kind of like thinking about. LI.F is thinking about it with Zaps. Biconomy's thinking about it with their MEE network and sort of meta transaction framework, et cetera. You expose more margin. And that's what's missing right now. Like the margins are raised to the bottom as people subsidize bridging routes. It's especially acute for us because you can't slip any bips on a stable send, right? And so you better be looking to create your margin elsewhere. As you start to think about smarter solving, quote unquote, I think that there's more margin in that. And I think it's sort of going to open up the market anew. And that's kind of how I think about it, like Intense Season 2. Intense Season 1 was all about like prove this framework, bridging is valuable, but it starts to become a race to the bottom, kind of like feels like middleware past a certain point in time. And then it's like, who owns the liquidity, who owns the order flow, and like, how do you need to program those things, and what margin does that programmability expose? That is the opportunity, I think, for the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, the money is always at the edges, right? Like with the exotic flows, because there's basically no bips to be made in stablecoins. Like everything is super competitive. So as soon as you start
Yeah.
stacking more actions on top of like stablecoin flows, that's where you can make money. And people are willing to spend a lot more for a lot more arbitrary actions, right? But
Yeah.
like my problem with that thesis is that people don't actually think along those lines from like a using crypto perspective, right? Like all of our mental frameworks for using crypto are very simplified. Like I'm going to go to Uniswap for a swap, I'm going to go to like Jumper for a bridging transaction, I'm going to go to Aave for like a lending transaction. What we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
achieve here with Zaps is like the ideal world, right? Like where users come to one interface and then
Yeah.
they just do everything and everything works in the background. Then how do you
Yeah.
differentiate
Totally.
between one app and the other in that sort of a world?
I don't know. You just gotta win the people. It's kind of like the neobanking race in the U.S. for the last few years, right? Like the feature set starts to collapse in sort of like the same set of like templated actions and features that a user wants to take, and then it's just like, what's your distribution strategy and what's your network effect moat?
Hmm.
Like classic business principles. And are you winning? Are you sort of like creating a network effect between sort of developers that are programming through your flows because it has certain benefits for them, and then ultimately the apps that are exposing end users to that new user experience? That's going to be like really exciting for the next couple of years, because I feel like interop has also become, what do I want to say, the word that comes to mind is honestly like incestuous. at this point in time. Like everyone's rebalancing everybody else's volume.
Yeah.
We're trying to net it out and figure out what's real. We're subsidizing all of each other's fees down to zero. Right? It's like a hilarious thing. It's temporary, so it's okay. But once we like find our way through it to like a new competitive sphere of UX and programmability, I think it starts to get a lot more interesting over the next kind of wave.
Yeah, I mean,
I
at
hope.
the end of the day, somebody has to rebalance the actual flows, right? Like, so we're just like moving the rebalancing problem from one bridge to another, and then like this keeps going around in circles. Um,
Yeah.
but do you think this is actually a good path for you as a builder, where every app sort of like looks the same, offers the same feature set, and then like the difference is only in the distribution and kind of like the UX benefits?
No, I don't mean to necessarily imply that. I just think that like the earliest stages of programmability are pretty templated,
Hmm.
right? There's like a few, there's I don't know how many it is, but call it like 5 or 6 typical on-chain actions that you could compose in sequence and play Tetris with in a different way. But that's going to cover a lot of the things, right? Um, I think though that like as the kind of on-chain landscape explodes, and as true programmable money that sort of like takes different forms as RWAs come in and new asset classes come in and institutional capital comes in and like really, really super hardcore latency and slippage performance requirements come in with a lot of that capital, then it's going to like expose the programmability space even more beyond the templated actions that may do well to capture a lot of apps and end users today. And that's just like a whole different design space.
Hmm.
And that's like blue ocean ahead. So I don't mean to imply that we're all kind of like building the same thing and just kind of then competing on branding UX. And that might be the case for some of these frameworks in phase one. But I think there's going to be so many new like capital requirements and capital constraints that come online as a lot of these new asset classes come online and you make markets for them. And especially as we kind of get outside the traditional AMM world and more into the order book world, now that that's a gas efficient sort of performant thing that we can deliver, then I think that this starts to become a lot more interesting over time. And I still think that like stablecoins wholesale flowing between a lot of those use cases and undermining a lot of those use cases and a lot of that market making that's happening online, regardless of who's doing the make or taker, is a significant opportunity for us because I think a lot of those flows are going to collapse into sort of like stablecoin wholesale flows at the end of the day, and that's where I want us to sit.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the app landscape today, it feels like we're in the transition phase, right? Like where people are still figuring out, do we want to build a super app, or like you said, the programmability aspect of crypto, it's still evolving. But if you had to make a bet today, stablecoins are the perfect bet because like there's definitely more and more stablecoins coming in, and then if the past is anything to go by, the flows are not going anywhere. So in a way, that's the safest bet to make right now. Which if I would say to you 3 years ago, like you would not believe me.
Yeah, I don't think so. 3 years ago, I think that this would have been a materially different conversation, right? And so fortunately, we've lived to see the day, right? We've had tastes of product market fit. We've built a lot of really good stuff, including some of the early stuff that no one ever used, like in the 2018-19 era, because it was just too soon. But some of that was like deep, good tech. So we built a lot of really good stuff. We've had a couple spikes along the way, but I think we had to survive to kind of like the right place, right time of stablecoin wave coming across the space, and fortunately, we're here to ride it.
So what's next for you guys? Like I wanna ask you a lot of things about the stablecoin landscape, but I wanna like finish this loop on eco. Like what's next for you guys in your roadmap?
So we think about this kind of full stack protocol in 3 pieces. We call them routes, accounts, crowd liquidity. All will be live in some version in July. Okay, crowd liquidity will be beta, accounts will be beta. Routes is still beta, but it's kind of growing out of it. Its volume, I think, now is appreciable enough that we know how we're trying to optimize it. But they're all launched standalone. So our platform, our protocol is tying them together. And so I think the kind of like big product inflection point we're at is getting all of them live with sort of key integrating partners, and then tying them together and optimizing the hell out of capital efficiency and order flow among them. And that's when the eco sort of like protocol emerges, right? That's when we get this kind of fast bridging, incredibly powerful programmability with the right liquidity model underpinning it that we're building toward. And so what's next for us, I think, is the realization of what we designed 12 months ago and have kind of sequentially put into the world, and now need to tie it together. And of course, there's intermittent like milestones, like chain expansion milestones outside of Ethereum that are straight ahead for us as we network the dollars on the chains and among the protocols that really matter. And that's just kind of like the steady march of our core roadmap. But I think what's particularly exciting is the way that kind of like the full protocol emerges, and you start to think about how it becomes pretty powerful kind of altogether over the course of this quarter.
Awesome. I want to.
Another way I would say really quickly though, I would say we've pulled off a successful 0 to 1 in this new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like what's next is like make it stick.
Yeah.
It's like make it stick. Take it like 1 to 10 with the right kind of liquidity network effects, optimizing for what we're seeing today in the early stages, like just like make it stick ruthlessly for the next 6 months. I'm really, really proud of what we've gone through and what we've taken 0 to 1. And you get into the arena, and that's an accomplishment. And then you get into the knife fight, so to speak. And I don't mean to sound too cutthroat about that, but like you got to find you got to find your niche, you got to own it, right? And that's what's making it stick. Otherwise, crypto's flippant, right? It's like the volume and traction can change on a moment's notice. So you need to know where your value capture is. You need to know who your highest leverage partners are, and then you need to double down.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, like, over the last 6 months, I think Eco is definitely one of the projects that's come onto my radar in Interop, because honestly, there's not a lot of new stuff happening, right? So whenever there's a new team that shows promise or like shows actual usage, everyone kind of notices. So I'm like glad that you're one of the teams, and then I really hope that the usage kind of sticks, and then you can grow from here. So all the best to you for that.
Yeah, totally. I think the I've been telling our team, just like we have to execute at an obscene level, but we also just have to be steady in getting there. And there's going to be a moment, which I think is starting to happen, and I hope it happens kind of during Q3, where the market like turns its eyes, it's like holy shit, where did Eco come from? Right? Like some of us, like I knew they'd been here and they're building this thing, and some of us kind of been following for the last 6 to 12 months, and still slowly steadily, and then all at once. And there's this sort of this ubiquity kind of within the stable sphere, as I think about it, among the issuers and the chains that matter, and we're starting to stitch that together pretty powerfully right now.
What do you think happens for like stablecoin adoption in the next 12 months? I mean, there was a bill passed in the US recently. People are still trying to figure out like what that actually means and how should one position for it. But what's your understanding of it right now?
Meteoric. Like I don't care if crypto rugs. The great thing about stablecoins is like stablecoins are have been monotonically increasing in usage across crypto market cycles. Of course, the growth rate of stablecoin usage like speeds and slows according to how hyped crypto is, but that is going to start to decouple. Stablecoins, like this is just money movement evolution. Mm-hmm. And now that is sort of accessible to institutions, it's accessible to product builders, it returns margin to every side of the transaction. It is a positive sum technology. And so whatever we think it's going to do, we're underestimating it. And it's going to be messy for a little while in terms of like, why do we have 100 different digital dollars? And we'll have to solve our way through that problem. But I think it's going to take off. I think the US market structure bill is pretty well tailored. It's like more optimistic than anything I honestly would have imagined for several years. It's overdue, but now I'm glad we have it. And given like some certainty and a pretty good sandbox to play in that's simple enough, I just think it takes off. And I hope that I actually think the bill is pretty good precedent. I hope that similar market structure bills are kind of like modeled after that elsewhere, and we don't end up with like a geographic mess. But I think that it's sort of like the validation and kind of like the total inflection point for some parties on the sideline to come in.
It sounds like stablecoins and Bitcoin are on the same path of adoption right now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised honestly if stablecoins go exponential over the next couple of years, right? We're kind of counting 10, 50 billion more in market cap at a time on stables. And I would not be surprised at all if a year or two from now, we're counting 250 billion increments in terms of stablecoin kind of market cap and issuance. And so, it's pretty amazing to see a lot of this validated. The crypto idealist in me wants to still go beyond stablecoin someday, but it's I think pretty satisfying to to see this technology being so quickly adopted.
Wait, do you also see like a future for non-US dollar stablecoins to take off?
Yeah, totally. I don't know how soon, but totally. I mean, you kind of need them, right? It's like I get the whole point of like dollarizing these flows, and like the world thinks in dollars in many ways, so it simplifies the psychology of things. But everyone gets paid in dollars. Some people might want to save in dollars, but that's different from being able to like spend in them in some geographies. And so non-USD stablecoins, I think, are fairly important to kind of like close the loop on I would just use crypto.
Mhm.
And I'm not an expert on this actually, like in terms of like where and when. I look at the market today and I see 99 point something percent of the flows happening in USD stablecoins. So those are the ones I'm focused on today. But I think it's an inevitability over the next 5 years that that others emerge because it's just practical, right? It's like, it might be fine to have millions of people in a non-dollar economy saving in dollars if the dollar is stable and there's benefits to doing that. It's not also practical to expect all of them to then also spend in dollars. So, a localized stablecoin needs to close that loop, I think. So that's just inevitability. I think it'll take a little bit longer to develop just because I don't currently see the like, the local use cases for it and the order flow demand for it in the market.
I mean, I feel
Quite
like
yet.
even for the governments, it's super important to kind of focus on it, right? Because right now, the
Yeah.
whole on-chain economy is kind of US dollar, based in US dollars, right? So all of the different currencies across the world are kind of missing out on everything that's happening in crypto.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
how do you like ignore that for the next decade, for example? Like, okay, for the first 10 years, you can probably ignore it because it's just noise for them. But at some point, the adoption
Yeah.
becomes so big and the flows become so big that you cannot ignore it anymore.
100%. And we're in like a new wave of currency competition,
Hmm.
um, which I hope is good. I generally think I think one of the more interesting things about crypto is like how it induces currency competition. And that's a pretty interesting thing to me. That's like a thing that I kind of nerd out on. I also think it's like pretty like potentially good for the world. A bunch of qualifiers on that, like what regulatory requirements apply, like what privacy trade-offs am I making, etc. Like those things, TBD in different places at different times. But I tend to think that like money's a technology, it evolves. If you let it evolve through a competitive sphere, um, hopefully it ends up in a point where it makes people's lives better. And I think crypto's like largely borne that out so far.
Hmm. I mean, so in terms of like your big bet here, you're like betting on stable coins kind of serving liquidity between chains, right? So
Mhm.
what needs to happen or what needs to go right for that to sort of play out? Or do you think that it's already playing out and then like we're on the right track for your flows to 10x from here or like 100x from here?
It's already it's already playing out. It's like a market organization problem,
Hmm.
right? So I kind of had an 80-20 perspective on this. You probably kind of already know this from prior conversation, but what I really care about is there are like wholesale flows and stablecoins among a short list of chains, and they just have like 90% of the volume. And so there's a single digit number of assets and issuers, and there's probably like a sub 20 number of chains. And that's where the vast majority of the flows ultimately happen or ultimately settle.
Hmm.
Um, and those are the ones that I care most about. That's happening, and so I think it's a market organization problem among them, where the chains and the stables themselves are like sort of key stakeholders in this system. Not in a way that's not in a way that's really dissimilar from how you know the banks and some of the money transfer rails are key stakeholders in Visa,
Hmm.
for example. And you got to create sort of like a positive sum construct for people to adopt the chains and adopt the stables that matter if they're routing your liquidity. And so I think that's our challenge, but it is happening. Um, and so, I think now our challenge is to sort of like expose that positive sum equation to those parties, um, work with them and with the protocols they care most about supporting to squeeze out that capital efficiency and that UX efficiency, such that when you're quote unquote powered by eco, um, that increasingly kind of like means something across chains. There's sort of like a trust among the builders and among the end users using their products that this is going to sort of be a seamless transaction for me, and that I only have to care about stables if I want to.
Awesome. Ryan, I think like this has been super good because like I got to know about eco much better from you, like with all the history, with all the context, and then all of your knowledge in the stablecoin ecosystem. I feel like we could probably make this a recurring thing where like I can come up to you and understand what's happening in the stablecoin market better because you just have such a better understanding. But thanks a lot for your time, and hopefully we can do this again.
I would love to do this again anytime. Invite me on one of the rants with TK someday. I want to hop on his. I want to hop on his hot takes. We can talk about how we're beating words in crypto to death. How interop is meaningless. What's the next wave? Whatever it may be.
I think
So
like
even if it's impromptu, just let me know.
we can do an episode with you and TK where like the title can be whose hot takes are hotter.
Oh, it's definitely his. 100%. I'm just free riding. I'm going to be there in the moment instead of catching up later. But really, really appreciate you having me on. It's been great to sort of get to know you in recent weeks, and been a long time listener, a long time watcher. This is the best content in our space. Whether you're someone who's new or whether you're a seasoned pro in some of this tech. And so I just really, really appreciate the way you string it together, who you have on, the way you stage these conversations. It's been good. I'm here for it literally anytime.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your kind words.
Yeah, indeed. See you.